November 1990.
65,000 on the machine for the third and final all over done.
The end of an era, as the hammer falls on plant and equipment at the Mount Morgan mine, Queensland, Australia. Mount Morgan, the Golden Mountain, arguably one of the world's great gold and copper mines, has poured its last ingot. Over 108 years, the mine produced incredible riches: 260 tons of gold, 386,000 tons of copper, and 37 tons of silver. Mount Morgan became the catalyst for the early development of Rockhampton and southeast Queensland. It provided work for generations of families. The Mount Morgan township owes its existence solely to the mine. At the turn of the century, profits from Mount Morgan were used to fund an oil company in the Middle East. That company became British Petroleum. The Walter and Eliza Hall Institute of Medical Research, Melbourne, was also started with proceeds from the mine. The total size of the mining leases is 676.6 hectares. This compares with Roxby Downs, South Australia, 17,778 hectares, and the Coronation Hill project in the Northern Territory, about 100 hectares. Mount Morgan is as bountiful in history as it has been in copper, silver, and gold. The Mount Morgan story starts in the 1850s. A stockman, William McKinley, finds traces of gold in the valleys of the Dee River. This sparked a short-lived gold rush that saw most prospectors going back home empty-handed. But others were not discouraged. In 1882, the Morgan brothers pegged their claim on what was once called Ironstone Mountain and founded the Mount Morgan Syndicate. The leases were taken over by the Mount Morgan Gold Mining Company in 1886. And with heavy equipment brought from Rockhampton by bullock teams and a new chlorination process, exceptionally high yields of gold were extracted. In 1889, the Mount Morgan Gold Mining Company paid dividends of £1 million. In present value, that represented almost $160 million. Shares were valued at £18 million, even more than the Broken Hill Company at that time. The gold bonanza that created this fortune was short-lived as the rich surface spoils became exhausted. Mining went underground. The lower-grade ores required much higher throughput to maintain profits. Copper tonnages soared, and a huge smelter was installed in 1905. The 1920s saw a drastic drop in world copper prices. Along with disastrous underground fires and industrial unrest, the Mount Morgan Gold Mining Company was forced into liquidation, and the mine closed down in 1927. 1929, and a new company, Mount Morgan Limited, was formed to operate the mine with open cut methods. Profitability returns, and Mount Morgan proceeds with over 30 years of mining and smelting. In 1969, Pico Wallsend Limited takes over Mount Morgan Limited and provides an injection of capital for new primary and secondary crushers, a new processing plant, and a new fleet of haulage trucks. In July 1981, open cut operations ended. Ironstone Mountain was now a pit over 1,000 feet deep. 1982, a tailings reclamation and retreatment program began, using the carbon in pulp, or CIP, process to recover gold and silver. 1988, the mine is sold to Elders Mining Proprietary Limited, a subsidiary of Elders Resources NZFP Limited. (1990), after processing over 27 million tonnes of tailings and recovering 14 tonnes of gold, the CIP plant would shut down and plant and equipment auctioned. In March 1991, contracts were exchanged between the chairman of Mount Morgan Limited, Mr. Peter Bradfield, and the Minister for the Department of Resource Industries, Mr. Ken Vaughan, that in due course will result in the handing back of the mining lease, the mine's heritage buildings, and the mine's freehold land.
We will now get on with the work.
Well, after all this, thanks very much for your cooperation.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you.
And in 1991, the mine's decommissioning plan was implemented. Yet, after more than 100 years, so much of the heritage of the mine and town remain. The Linda Shaft, the centre of underground operations. The famous Linda car, which took thousands of men down into the dangerous work below.
You got used to it after a while. The first couple of times, it was very strange to be going down. They had little bits of, I think it was 25-watt bulbs or something, hanging about every 20 yards. You could just see. It wasn't very pleasant, but you got used to it going up and down, and it was no problem after a while. But in the crib room, one of the crib rooms one night on the 650 level, the men had their crib, and we walked out. It was about 8 of us, I think there was. We walked out to go back to our work after we'd finished crib, and the foreman came out and told us how lucky we were that a two-ton rock had fallen out of the ceiling of the crib room onto the table where we'd been eating. That was the worst experience I had all the time I was there. And down at 950 feet down, we worked in swimming togs. It was that hot. Even although there was air being pumped down to us, it was still very hot. But as I say, I was young and strong, I suppose.
These apprentices were just some of the lads that found work here at the mine's carpentry shop. Amongst the silent machinery, a mechanized cowboy and Indian display. No one knows when or how it made its way here. The head carpenter's office remains undisturbed, a bottle of saw sharpening fluid still half full. The mine's powerhouse boasted the highest capacity in Queensland for many years. Generators, compressors, and boilers that ran day and night have now served their purpose. The workshops where machinery was maintained and materials stored have endured the harsh Mount Morgan climate. Standing as a sentinel over the mine and town is the old smelter stack. The general office of the mine was commissioned in 1897. Built from locally made bricks, it consists of 9 large offices and 4 fireproof vaults. In 1906, the northern wing was added, providing space for surveyors, engineers, and draftsmen. The western wing was built in 1920 for payroll and clerical departments.
To learn that it was hard. I used to go home at night time and I'd put a chair up against my bed, and if I thought I had made a mistake through the metallurgical business in the daytime, I'd have a pencil and a paper, and through the night I'd wake up with an inspiration, and I'd say, oh, I've done this wrong, and it had come to me where I had gone wrong, and I'd write this down on the piece of paper, and I'd go up in the morning and correct it.
A roll of honour stands as a testament to the miners who served during the Great War. The The General Office was classified by the National Trust in 1974. Callyangle House provided short-term accommodation for visiting directors. Probably the finest house in Mount Morgan is the mine manager's home. With spacious entertaining areas, it clearly reflects the importance of the occupant. Every sample drilled at Mount Morgan and the surrounding district is held in the core room. The old gold room has been made available to a local Aboriginal group who make boomerangs and other craftware. This provision of mine property follows the example of previous directors who have provided sports and recreation facilities for the townsfolk. Archival material, including site plans, annual reports, share registers and correspondence dating back to 1880, have been donated by the mine to the University College of Central Queensland Mount Morgan collection. The town of Mount Morgan has an equally proud heritage. It was a town where a man's fortunes echoed the status of the mine.
So I went up to the mine. My dad happened to be a timberman in the mine, and he came home off night shift one morning and he said, "You better go up and register, son." He said, "You might get a job up there." So up I go. And the old employment officer, he looked me over and said, "How old are you?" I said, 19. I wasn't 19, but those days you had to be 19 to get a man's pay. So I said, he said, "If you're sure you're 19?" I said, "Oh, yeah." So he said, "Oh, well, you're big enough anyhow." So, and he offered me one of either 5 jobs at that time. 5 jobs I had to pick from. And at the last one, he said, "Timberman now." He said, "Wait a minute." He said, "Your dad's a timberman, isn't it, in the mine?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Oh, that's the job you want, off-siding for him." So I was off-siding for Dad in the mine as a timberman. We used to cut the timber for the underground workings with a gang of 12 of us. And I stayed there until the mine caught fire in 1925. And, well, of course, we were all thrown out of work then, about 600 or 800 of us.
But through the good times and bad, religious and other groups flourished. Always a progressive town, the high school was the first to be built outside of Brisbane. The sons of Mount Morgan fought for king and country since the Boer War. And no self-respecting Queensland town would be without an adequate selection of drinking holes. This suspension bridge at Tipperary Point gave workers a shortcut to the mine and is one of 2 in the town listed by the Australian National Heritage and the Queensland National Trust. If one building encapsulates Mount Morgan's heritage, it's the railway station. This grand building, also listed by the National Trust, was once the heart of the town, providing regular passenger and goods services to Rockhampton. Tourism has been encouraged but has always struggled, as the town is not on a major highway. As part of the decommissioning plan for the mine, Elders Mining, on behalf of its new owner, Carter Holt Harvey Limited, instituted an environmentally sensitive decommissioning program. This continues the environmental improvement activities started in the 1970s. Key projects of the early programs were reshaping, application of fertiliser, and seeding waste dumps. Revegetation of mined areas, and surface treatment. These activities were most successful. Here are some examples. The area around the number 8 dam. The Western Dumps. Horse paddocks. D-dump. And Shepherd's Gully. When the Mount Morgan mine closed, much emphasis was placed on minimizing the risk of pollution to the Dee River by the leakage of contaminated water from the mine site. Historically, waste rock and tailings disposal was relatively random, resulting in some dumps being located over watercourses that feed the river. To minimize the impact of the decommissioned mine on the environment, the original pumping equipment was upgraded. Old tunnels were plugged, and a major environmental improvement program was implemented. This program included the environmentally sensitive areas at the Mount Morgan site. A spillway was constructed at the open cut dam to divert exceptionally heavy rainfall that may occur once in 100 years towards the No. 2 Mill Tailings Dam area. The open-cut overflow weir is designed to cater for overflows and managed releases through two 900mm diameter stainless steel valves. With managed releases, the probability of an uncontrolled spill is 1 in 100. Hydrological modelling of rainfall statistics, based on 72 years of records, predicts the number of years and the average number of days each year for which managed releases may be required. Because water from the No. 8 dam leaks into the open cut, adding to its potential spill rate, a 30 litre per second pump has been installed. Delivery line has been positioned to discharge into the Dee River, immediately upstream of the Mayenberg crossing. The dam will be maintained in a dewatered state to allow surge capacity for the inflow in times of heavy rainfall. At the No. 2 Mill Tailings Dam, tailings were covered with rock fill, which was then covered with oxidised waste rock, ready for seeding. A major drainage channel was shaped through the middle of the dam to manage heavy downpours and any overflow from the open cut spillway. The tailings discharge tunnel and the old headgear bin tunnel were plugged to prevent seepage from the open cut. A summit flume was formed in Linda Gully to divert stormwater to Dairy Creek. At Sandstone Dam, a massive membrane was installed to seal the dam and prevent seepage into Mundick Creek. Diversion drains were installed near Shepherd's Dam to divert water away from Shepherd's Gully. major rock blasting was required to create the channel.
You can light the fuse when you're ready.
The northern and southern diversion channels from number 2 Mill and Shepherd's Gully were treated by grading, contouring, the addition of lime, and hand-spreading seed for grass, acacia and flea tree. The extent of the environmental project is illustrated by the transformation of Frog Hollow. The original Frog Hollow sump was drained, then a base of inert slag was laid. This was covered by a layer of crushed granite. The granite was then compacted. Finally, a thick plastic membrane was installed and sealed in position. Other projects in the decommissioning plan included the collection of meteorological data from the site by the Queensland Environmental Department. And the monitoring of water quality at 9 locations on the mine site and 6 locations along the Dee River. Gates and fences secure the site. The equipment has been dismantled and shipped out. The sounds of mining and processing are long gone. The grasses and trees have grown over old rock dumps. But still people come to see the mine for themselves, to hear the story firsthand, to grasp 100 years of history. The final handover ceremony took place in the School of Arts building on Wednesday, March 31st, 1993. Those officiating included Mr. Tony McGrady, Queensland Minister for Minerals and Energy, Mr. Jack Woods, Chairman Mount Morgan Limited, and Mr. Stan Radloff, Chairman Mount Morgan Shire Council. Mr. Woods acknowledged the role of many people in bringing the project to a successful conclusion, particularly that of the project manager, Mr. Laurie Kwan. The Minister thanked the company for their cooperation and the manner in which the program was carried out. The sun may have set over the ever-present smokestack, but the legend of Mount Morgan, the Golden Mountain, will live forever.